Awakened Living is a 21st century movement for people who consider themselves spiritual but not religious, who have a deep hunger for connected community and a divine impulse for personal and global transformation. Our mission is to encourage and inspire the awakening of human consciousness. Good evening. Welcome to Awakened Living Television. So delighted you've chosen to be with us. My name is TJ Woodward. I'm the host of your show. I'm also the spiritual director of the Awakened Living spiritual community in San Francisco. And to begin, I want to say that we have really exciting news. We have a new space where we're going to be holding our Sunday morning gatherings. We're going to be at the Hotel Rex on Sutter Street in Union Square starting on Sunday, June 5th. We're bringing back live music. If you haven't attended one of our Sunday morning gatherings, it's a morning filled with deep guided meditation, inspirational music, a message by either myself or Reverend Dr. Joan Stedman, and then a conversation about a relevant spiritual topic. So please join us on Sunday, June 5th. For more information, visit us online at awakenedlivingsf.org. So excited about this evening's show. We have Dr. Christine Pappas with us. She is an incredible therapist and also a great friend and a colleague. I would trust her with anyone going through challenging situations. She specializes in eating disorder, chemical dependency, and helping people through trauma, whether that's early childhood trauma or a traumatic event in their adult life. So delighted to have Dr. Pappas on the show with us. Really looking forward to this conversation. Welcome to the show. So happy that you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And I mean that. You're just such a delight. I've seen you do miraculous work with clients, helping them use difficulty as a transformative experience. Before we begin the conversation, why don't you let people know a little bit about you and your work?
Sure, yeah. So I've been in the mental health profession for almost about 20 years, and I've worked in a variety of settings. I've worked in residential, I've worked in day programs, I've worked in treatment centers that primary diagnosis is eating disorders or chemical dependency. I've worked a lot with children, teenagers, young adults, and families. I love family work. I think it's really important to create just a really loving and compassionate family and a very safe family. And family could be friends, it could be significant other, and also obviously family of origin. And currently I'm in private practice, and in private practice both in the Bay Area, Sausalito, and in San Francisco. And I specialize mainly treating those in recovery from an eating disorder, various addictions, and trauma, however we define trauma.
Well, I am so excited about our conversation, and I know what we're going to be talking about loosely, and we'll trust the conversation to go where it wants to go, is how we do take difficult experiences or challenging experiences, whether we call that trauma or whether we're coming out of an addiction. How do we transform difficulty into a new way of being and a new way of seeing? I wonder how you'd like to open that conversation.
Yes, yeah. Well, I work very much in the mind, body, and kind of soul connection. And soul might be what is one's meaning and purpose in life. And oftentimes we forget that when we get into an addiction or an eating disorder, or just get off our path, or if we have a lot of stressful life events that take place, we might get stuck in those events. So trauma could be a transition in life, it could be a divorce, it could be something that is like an earthquake, or even something that's hurtful emotionally and or physically. So I work with somebody in a very compassionate way, and also in a way that's connecting and integrating kind of the mind-body orientation of a person, and helping them to change the narrative of their story, so they feel empowered and they know that they have choices. And that's really important. And so by doing that, it helps someone to say, wow, I can make a difference here, or the story that I've been telling myself that might be a self-destructive story can actually be something that can benefit me and go to a place of kindness and compassion, versus beating myself up over and over again.
Oh, I love that, because, I know I've worked intimately with you with a few different clients, and you've made such a profound change in people's life. I love that you're talking about the stories and the stories that we all are created or we have created. And the way I say it is the shortcut to living in a peaceful world is to live beyond our stories.
Right.
And, many of us, and I also work in the field of addiction recovery, chemical dependency. And I think for many people coming out of an addiction, they may not even realize the narrative in their mind. They may not even realize the negative self-talk. How do you help someone, first recognize that this is happening, and then how do we change those stories? Because some people have been carrying around these beliefs about themselves for years.
Yeah, for years and years, and believe it to the point where it almost becomes the core of our belief system. So challenging those core belief systems and looking at even the family lineage of that which we're born into. There's a generational story or stories that we may inherit, and some of them might be really powerful and empowering, and then some of them may keep us kind of stuck. So looking at challenging those belief systems, when did they come about, how old we were, when we started to believe that that story, and then how do we want to change it, shape it, shift it so it really fits more of our authentic self. And I think the power of narrative is so important because not only is it cognitively important, but just also our body, like telling a story of empowerment and something that we can really integrate so it becomes a whole versus fragmented. So again, challenging the belief systems, looking at when the belief system started, how it serves a person, how it doesn't serve a person, and then what do you want to put in place of that belief system? Because if you take away that belief system and if you're left with, nothing, a void,
right.
It's like, well then, wow, you have a choice to actually fill it with something that feels really good and that feels really real and true to oneself.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love that you're talking about the authentic self because really in the work that I do, it's really about helping people reintegrate or integrate back into wholeness.
Right.
Because, you and I before this show were talking and seeing all these beautiful babies and all these beautiful young people. And when we look into the eyes of those really young people, they have a presence and a curiosity and an awe and a wonder about life.
Right.
And somehow along the line, and I love that you're talking about family systems because we get taught a whole lot of things often by well-meaning but deeply unconscious people. I was deeply unconscious for many, many years, and I was believing these stories and these lies. And I love that you're talking about questioning those thoughts and allowing that to open up to really question, like, where did I get this? How do I let this go? Right. What else is possible? Really living in those questions. Right. When we talk about trauma, and you mentioned things, being held in the body. What we know about trauma is things get stuck in the body and they live there. How do you help people? And maybe we could talk about like what is trauma because I think it gets misunderstood. Right. And then how do you work with people in helping them release these traumatic events and opening up to a life that is much more on purpose?
Sure. Well, I think part of the piece of being curious too. I think curiosity is really helpful in the sense that when we're in curious mode versus fear mode, fear mode's kind of a constricting, restrictive place. And sometimes we're in fear mode for a reason, and it's self-protective and self-preservation, right? So that plays its role. But when we go into a curious mode, we're open, we're able to look at something a little bit more differently, and we're open to possibility and the possibility of blossoming in a different way. So there's the curiosity of a story that I'm always wanting to explore, and with trauma, trauma affects people in so many different ways. And so what may be traumatizing for me may not be traumatizing for you, right? So we're looking at temperament, we're looking at the age of trauma, we're looking at, is it chronic, is it a one-time trauma, and how it can deeply affect somebody physiologically. It disrupts the nervous system, the brain can kind of go into fight or flight or freeze mode. So how to unlock the trauma in a way that's very safe for the person, trusting. So a lot of the work I do is just creating a very safe container for the person to come in and be whatever mood they're in, right? And then gradually get them grounded within their body. And so there's certain grounding techniques and mindfulness techniques, and there's different modalities definitely that one can implement to help somebody in trauma. But a lot of my work is just that kind of getting them grounded, feeling safe, trusting, telling their story, and how to reframe it in a way that they feel a sense of I say empowerment again, but really a sense of feeling safe in their body and trusting in their body. Because in trauma, we don't feel safe. And so that goes into kind of this belief system of, well, I'm not safe, so I'm going to put all these different, kind of guards up or drink or go into my eating disorder, which can be profound coping mechanisms. A glass of wine can easily turn into 10 glasses of wine, an eating disorder going on a diet, and all of a sudden what makes a diet go into disordered eating. So some of these things that we go towards have been used to cope with something, a stressful life event. So I also work in helping to refuel the brain and the body, so I can then help the person process whatever it is that they're coming in with. So sometimes we need the food, to refuel the brain, the nutrition. Sometimes we need mindfulness kind of techniques to feel safe in the body and feel grounded in life. And then go into the processing of what it's like to talk about something and know that there's a different way of being with this story.
Wow. This is why I love you. I mean, I love you in general, just period.
Love you too.
But when we talk, when I hear you talking about the way you work with people, it so resonates with me, and it so resonates with the work that I do as well. And, I'm writing my second book right now, which is Conscious Recovery. And I'm looking at, in my work, what I've seen as the three core underlying issues that drive addiction, which is unresolved trauma, toxic shame, and spiritual disconnection.
Yes, yeah.
And when you're talking about creating a safe space, when I think of you, that's what actually not when I think of you, but when I imagine being with you, the word safety does come up. And I've had the privilege of being in group with you and watching you work with clients, and you create this really powerful safe space, which to me is of utmost importance in the first step for that, because obviously with trauma, we do feel unsafe, and there is a separation. There's that separation from self, and there is the fight, flight, or freeze, as you said. And helping someone recognize there's nothing wrong there.
Correct.
That is actually a strategy. I call them brilliant strategies because it worked really well at one point.
Right.
And now it's become maladaptive, right? So now we're ready for a new story.
Right, ready for a new story. And we go into survival, right? Survival mechanisms that our brain goes into to help us live through something. And then how do we turn that survival state into thriving state and not stay stuck in the fight or flight or freeze, state. So there's certain modalities to help do that and help the brain even integrate the right and left hemispheres, integrate that story, and then integrate in the body as well. And so that's a piece that I find fascinating, is just how we're wired to survive. And then when does it become maladaptive, and when does it, come to a place where we're using these coping mechanisms in a self-destructive fashion and then can't really enjoy our lives, right?
Yeah.
And to find meaning and purpose even in a story that has hardship to it, because let's face it, part of the human experience is, it's not always butterflies and rainbows.
Yes.
Life can sometimes throw us a curveball. So how do we, be able to sit with that and work through those challenging moments that we have?
Yeah, and that's really what I'd like to talk about more now. It's like, how do we take life's difficult experiences, whether we call it a traumatic experience or just difficulties in our life, loss of job. One thing that comes to mind is you were talking about how one thing is traumatic for one person and not another. And for me, in my own experience and in working with patients and clients, it's usually very early, stuff that happened very early on. So one person, I know that when we look at PTSD with people coming back from fighting in a war, why is one person experiencing PTSD and why is one person not? And so much of the evidence and then the research shows that early childhood trauma contributes to trauma being a repetitive way of being. So I would love to talk about how we do take these challenging experiences, reframe them, create meaning and purpose out of those. And, wouldn't it be great, and I'm going to be careful how I say this, but wouldn't it be great if we could just say, I'm going to see the good in this?
Yes.
For most of us, it's a much more involved process. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, I work a lot with compassion. So when we come from a place of compassion, for ourselves, right? Maybe a compassion towards a certain situation we were in, whether or not harm was done upon us that we couldn't control, or we were in a situation that, again, we felt at a loss or grieving about. How do we find compassion for ourselves? And again, come from a place of curiosity and openness, and really trusting the body, knowing that we have the mechanisms that we need in the wiring that we need to be able to get through a difficult situation. You know, sometimes with temperament, we all have different temperaments. So again, what might be traumatic for me may not be traumatic for you, and vice versa. So kind of looking at how we're wired and working with what we have, and then also creating a support system. And I think a support system is so important because we can't do this on our own. You know, we are, as a species, here to attune, attach, to connect. And so how do we build, our family, so to speak, our chosen family that really resonates for us and really has our well-being, at the heart, of the core of what's needed and what's necessary. So I look at, kind of what's how the person's wired and the traits in their story as they're growing up, and then also building community and creating a sense of wellness in the community. Yeah. So it all integrates together. So what's going on inside is also reflected on the outside, and vice versa.
Beautiful.
Yeah, hope that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we could talk about this for a long time. There's many different facets.
Yeah.
And I say there's layers within layers. There's layers within the layers of complexity of trauma or addiction or eating disorders that there's not just usually one quick fix. You're also looking at if there's depression or if there's anxiety, or, how did a certain self-destructive behavior help a person. And again, if I'm going to tell someone to stop, their eating disorder, then what's going to be put in place of that? And really working on a soulful level, again, finding meaning and purpose, even meaning and purpose in the eating disorder, and then how to be able to find meaning and purpose in one's life. And still stay, attached and attuned to what's speaking to the soul.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I love that because in traditional, if you will, addiction work, a lot of times the addiction is viewed as negative or bad or wrong.
Yeah.
And we need to get rid of it. And I love what you're working with, which is like, what is it you were seeking in that?
Yeah.
Because there's something really powerful in, as you said, becoming curious about what that eating disorder or what that chemical brought the person, and then being able to recognize, yes, it did serve me in that way, and now it's not.
Yes.
And that's why we call it an addiction, right?
Yes,
Because I say otherwise we just call it fun.
Right. It's a slippery slope. Yeah. There's the fine line, right?
Right.
And what is one really craving, or what are you really hungry for? And I love that question because we can all relate to that on varied degrees. What are we really hungry for? What are we really wanting, needing, desiring? What speaks to us? How can we get out of our own way? What am I really craving? What am I really desiring here? And if I can't get my needs met right away, how do I sit with that and know that I'm whole anyway? And so how to work with that maybe impulsivity of wanting something we can't have, and how to ride out the wave of that kind of angst that may get in our way.
Wow, beautiful. And also connecting with that essential self,
Yes.
Learning how to recognize there's that part of us that is whole and perfect, that is never been harmed and is harmless,
Yes.
right? I'm wondering about the role of forgiveness in all of this. It just keeps coming up as you're talking, and a lot has been said about forgiveness. So I'm just curious, what is the role of forgiveness in this process of whether we call it recovery or reconnecting or taking difficulty and finding meaning and purpose from it?
Right. I was, funny you said that, the word forgiveness, because I was thinking about that too a couple of minutes ago. I'm like, where does forgiveness kind of fit in? And then where I went to is gratitude, to be in gratitude. I have those who I work with, clients, patients, writing a gratitude journal, and how to start your day with intention and end your day with gratitude, or maybe start your day with gratitude and end with gratitude. So they're kind of bookmarkers for the day to stay mindful and in the moment. And forgiveness is interesting because I never really want to, force someone if they're not ready to forgive. Forgiveness is something that may take a while. So also looking at how to accept what is, how to also work on self-acceptance. And then maybe in that self-acceptance, we soften and we go to forgiveness, forgiving myself for I don't know, I'm just trying to think here, having an eating disorder. I mean, who wants to wake up and be and stuck in an eating disorder? And how does one forgive themselves for that? Because certainly no one wakes up and says, gee, I think I want to be an addict today. Or gee, I think, anorexia nervosa sounds good. I think I'll try that out, So it's not like we want these things, but I think with some of the shame and guilt that we put upon ourselves and even society, not fully understanding the complexities of addiction and eating disorders, it's oftentimes patients blame themselves. And so how to come from a place of compassion and self-acceptance and looking at how did this one serve you, how does it not, and how to start the process of forgiving.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Because in my own journey, I remember when I first got sober, which is now 30 years ago, I went right to forgiveness. And there was a lot of encouragement with the people that were around me. Yes, make amends, go to forgiveness. And I wasn't ready yet because I hadn't really processed and felt, for me, I hadn't felt the full impact of the relationships that needed healing.
Yeah.
And that primary relationship, of course, is the relationship with self,
Right.
primarily. And then also, those family of origin
Yes.
relationships that, take some time to work through.
Yes.
And recognizing that it is a complex system. I'm wondering what brought you into this work, if you'd be willing to share about that. Because in my own journey, my own addiction, my own spiritual awakening, it's what really brought me into working in the spiritual realm and doing spiritual care in chemical dependency programs. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about what brought you into this work.
Yeah, certainly a journey. And I do look back and try to figure out what was those aha moments that I had. And there are a few. One is I have a family member that suffered and suffers from addiction and an eating disorder. And so I grew up with that. And the different emotions that I felt, the anger, the rage, the grief, the being kind of on fight or flight myself because not knowing, it's a very unpredictable world, kind of living vicariously through the addiction and what that's like. And then I certainly have had my own sense of disordered eating. I was, my outlet was running and, silly little, diets here and there, but certainly can take on kind of be all encompassing after a while. So I kind of went through my own little play out with my relationship with food in my body. And then I would say I read this book and it's called Reviving Ophelia. And I read the book about 22 years ago. And when I read it, it just struck me. And it's the therapist that treated teenagers suffering from eating disorders. And it just so spoke to just my heart, really. And I knew that was something that I wanted to get involved in. So when I went to grad school, again, in unfolding, I thought, well, I'm never going to work in addiction because I know that. But then, of course, that changed. And I worked, a lot with children and teens. And then I would just have these epiphanies, and who would come in my door would be teenagers and young adults, telling their story about the relationship with food and their body and using drug and alcohol. And I thought, well, I'm home. This is what I'm meant to do. So that's been kind of my journey professionally, and then personally doing my own work and always keeping true and humble and kind of doing my own surrendering to, what it means to, just kind of be in the field, but also work with my own grief around addiction and how that showed up in my personal life.
Wow, beautiful. I just heard something that I've never heard before when we talk about working in the field. I was thinking about being in the field of presence, like that we could, because working in that field as well.
Yes.
We have just a few minutes left, and that might be a great segue to talking about the role of spirituality. And I know that the term spirituality, a lot of people hear it very differently.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about how spirituality plays a role in your practice with people, even in your own individual life, and how that impacts people in assisting them, because what we've really talked about today is using the power of intention, the power of transformation, to really move through these difficult situations and into a new way of being, a new way of seeing, and finding purpose and meaning.
Yeah.
So what's the role of spirituality?
Ooh, I know. It's such a hot topic. And it's such a subjective experience. So I always ask the person or even the family, what is the role of spirituality? And for some, it's God. For some, it's Mother Nature. For some, it's just finding meaning and purpose in their life. For some, it might be a walk, on the beach. So just finding that connection with something bigger than self, and something that they can tap into, some type of energy like source, let's say, that inspires them and gives them a sense of calmness and relaxation and a sense of trust. So whatever that is for somebody, and then I use that as a vehicle to kind of keep them connected to that. Like, how do you stay connected to your spirituality? How do you find meaning and purpose in that? And then for myself, I would say there's got to be something out there. Definitely, I do believe that's bigger than ourselves and something infinite. And I love Mother Nature. So for me, and especially the work that I do, and just who I am as a person, I like to go on hikes and walks and go to the beach and kind of reconnect and be still in that way. So spirituality is something that I do integrate, and again, it's up to the person, the family, of what it means for them, and to keep staying connected to that daily, even if it's for 2 minutes a day, to just keep feeding that part of us that is so wanting to be seen and witnessed.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. And the word that you kept saying is connection. And to me, that's the essence of spirituality. And like, as you said, it could be God for one person, it can be Mother Nature, it can be, higher self,
right.
Or it can be none of that. It can be collective consciousness. Sure. Whatever it is, it's about connection, right? Yes. Connection with self, connection with others, connection with our essential self, that part of us that's never been harmed. Yeah. I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for you and the work that you do and our partnership as friends and colleagues. Yes. In closing, are there any closing thoughts that you want to leave our viewers with? Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
Well, just thank you so much for tuning in tonight, and I have a website that will be coming up soon, so hopefully within the next month. And if you have any questions, by all means, call me if you have someone who's needing help from an eating disorder or just needing to reconnect with their authentic self. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Pappas, so much for being with us. Thank you to our viewers. Please look up Dr. Christine Pappas on the web. She does have a new amazing website about to launch. She is just such an incredible presence and incredible power in this work of integrating ourselves back into wholeness, back into a life filled with meaning and purpose. So grateful to you, our viewers, who have continued to support our show. And for more information about my work, you can visit me online at tjwoodward.com. And again, our spiritual community in San Francisco, awakenedlivingsf.org. Thank you so much for being with us this evening, and good night.